It is 3 o'clock in New York, and it's time to start. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar about remote reading diagnostic and placement of adult learners in the times of COVID-19. Definitely a topic in our minds at this time of year, and considering many states are still in lockdown. I'm Yevgen Borodin, or just Gene for short. I wear two hats. I'm a part-time computer science professor at Stony Brook University, a leading university in the State University of New York system, where I focus on computer accessibility research. And I'm also the CEO of Capti Voice, a AAA for teachers and instructors helping assess, accommodate, and accelerate reading. I will be your host today, and we'll be here to make sure you have an engaging experience today. Our hope is that you will leave the event today with more ideas and tools for helping adult learners get on track to a successful career. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker today, Dr. John Sabatini. Dr. Sabatini, a distinguished research professor at the University of Memphis, who prior to that was a principal research scientist at the R&D division at ETS, Education Testing Service, you all know. John has enjoyed a prolific career, received numerous grant awards, and you can always catch him at the major reading conferences. By the way, John was one who actually created ReadReady Diagnostic Assessment, formerly known as SARA, which we will highlight today. And John has led his research group at ETS to fully develop, test, and validate this assessment. And today you will learn how you can get access to this assessment at no cost to you or your students. Also with us today is Brian Ash, who is the product support manager at Capti. And if you work with us, he will be your main point of contact for all product questions about Capti or ReadReady. And this completes the introduction. John, take it away.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for joining. So, thank you all. In spite of months of this COVID situation, I'm still, like many of you, adapting myself to a remote technological delivery and learning platform. So I guess I still have to ask forgiveness whenever I do not tech up properly. So one of the things that I learned a few days ago was that this hour-long session should only be about a half hour in length. Brian and Gene, Yevgen, both said to me, well, look, people just can't watch or listen to something longer than a half hour. And I said, but I'm a research professor. I really don't even get warmed up until almost a half hour. But I've been working feverishly for all of you because I know that's tedious. I can't sit through webinars that last that long. So after this lengthy introduction, I hope to move through, hopefully not too much content within the half-hour range and then leave some time for questions. But one of the concessions I got from the Capti Voice folk, Gene and others, was that they would allow me a series of these webinars, since if I can't jam everything into one, maybe I can do it over several. So I hope that you will join us again, and as we go along, we'll send out a schedule. And in fact, at the end, I hope of the session, you'll send out a list of topic ideas for what you think would be useful for the field for me to focus on in the future. And I also want to bring to your attention the large yellow email address in the middle of the screen. Please jot that down. That's how you join this research. And so, as you can see here, the assessments we're talking about now are part of a IES, Institute of Education Sciences, Department of Ed, research project that was given to us. It's actually we were just awarded our no-cost extension, so we're extending the project through at least September of 2021, and the opportunities that Yevgen talked to you about should be available for you at least through till then. At the middle of the screen, you see a website page. By the end of today, you should be able to use it to see a login or a sign-up page for participating in this research, which means getting free access to Read Ready and some other goodies as we go along. And in the future, and at this moment, I'd like to introduce our research coordinator here at the University of Memphis, Elizabeth Halle, H-A-L-L-E, like Halle Berry, Smith. And you can always reach out and contact her as well as me, and she will probably be in contact with you as you follow up on some of these opportunities. I also want to mention that we were fortunate to receive funding from the Department of Ed for another project for adult literacy education. It's basically called Auto Tutor, which is why that email keeps saying Auto Tutor for adult reading comprehension. It's actually already available in a form on the web. And so if you go to this website, it's designed to help adults with reading comprehension strategy instruction. And it will be, it's always available, and we will be adapting and updating it and improving it, and looking for you to participate in our research that way as well. I'd like to thank all the collaborators we have in both of these projects, and especially Capti Voice for giving us this platform. So I will try as hard as best as possible to avoid getting too researchy with you. We're talking about placement. So first thing I'm going to talk to you about is educational functional levels, the ways that the National Reporting System breaks up the different levels of adult literacy learners, adult education learners. And I'm going to give you a little bit of what I would consider to be primary learning targets at each level, sort of where you want to come out from each one. Just a little bit of research, sort of how adults read differently or develop differently than readers in the K through 12 range. Since I've done a lot of research in that area too, in fact, adapting some of these assessments from work done there, and this will help you to see why adults might be a little bit different and why you need to be thinking about placement and diagnostics a bit differently. Many of you already know this, by the way. I'm going to back up a step. You have that on-the-ground experience from working with adults, but you'll be able to give me feedback about whether we're on track with what we're seeing and what you know. Then we'll go into a Read Ready, formerly known as the SARA, for those of you who know this research and have actually worked with us in the past. Yevgen will give us a very short demo of the live website, which again, over the year is being improved. So the feedback you're going to give us, yourself and your learners, is going to help us to improve it for use. And then I'll walk you through the subtests very briefly to give you a sense or a flavor of what each one's sort of like, and connect that back to the diagnostics. Then we'll be close to the end at that point. I'm going to go over a few recommendations for placement in general, from both history and the present, and how that connects to Read Ready. Gonna just tease a little bit about how you can think about a developmental plan for mixing foundational skills across the educational functioning levels. And then we're going to move into questions and answers. So in preparing for this particular session, I dug out one of the first reports I've ever made for adult literacy. And it was basically what you see here. It was published at first as a report, and then later as a journal article in the journal Adult Basic Education. And this were the concluding remarks. And please stay to the end because I'm going to qualify these. They've changed a little bit over the years. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here. But basically, the final statement in the article said, overall, it may be concluded that less placement testing may be more valuable to both students and adult literacy programs. Less time on testing means less cost for testing. Perhaps even more important is that many adult learners have complained about their distaste for and fear of standardized testing. By cutting back on testing and moving towards a self-assessment model, programs may stimulate greater motivation and satisfaction among the clients they wish to serve. Now, let me give you a little bit more context of what that study was about. So there were only 4 placement levels we were considering in the study back then. And the learners that in the programs we looked at were being tested during the first time they would show up at the literacy program, which I don't think is any longer the standard practice. And they were given 3 hours of TABE testing. And so we compared that to, say, giving them 37 minutes of TABE locator testing at the time, it's 1993, and or a 15-minute TABE vocabulary locator if you were just placing into reading. And we based our kind of conclusion on the assumption that you would be able to sensitively move students from one level to another if you didn't place them properly in different classes. And I think that's always still important because there's such a, as you'll see, such a range of profiles, especially around the cut points between levels, that, you have to be sensitive about this. And this was all prior to the National Reporting System of Accountability, which has more requirements for intake testing so that you can demonstrate that adults are moving from one level to the next. So, and if this fires up some chat or questions, I apologize. I hope it won't. I looked over and over to make sure I'm getting the estimates of grade equivalent levels and the descriptors appropriate for the National Reporting System educational functional levels. And it appears sometimes the labels moved about, the descriptors moved about, and I dislike the use, as many of us do in adult education, the use of grade equivalents. But I do want to use them here in part to sort of indicate the comparison to what we might have expected had we had children going through their natural development in K through 12 to learn to read in comparison to, say, adult learners. So again, here's something for the Q&A period. If you're at beginning literacy, you are learning to read, and a lot of your focus has to be on learning to decode. Now, later I'm going to show you a mixture of skills, and you're always going to be doing a mixture of skills. And that's where I'm going to end up at the end. But if you had to talk about a real important focus, it's likely to be learning to read and decode. And I will also give a few caveats on that. I'm sorry, I'm a researcher. I can't help. I can never make solid only with those statements. At the level 2, you really want to move not only from sort of decoding and word recognition to reading fluently. And you really were going to want to encourage this a lot. By the end of this period, you really want your adult learners to start to think of themselves as being able to read. You don't have to read deeply. They just have to read frequently. They have to start being comfortable reading the cereal box, reading children's stories, reading made for adult easy reading, but reading, feeling comfortable with the reading process and starting to read text fluently. By the EFL 3, and again, if you were in a grade school, you'd be thinking about these things this way too. In the intermediate, low intermediate, you now start to want to be thinking a lot more about the different text structures. Are they compares and contrasts? Are they lists? Are they arguments? Are they explanations? How, and then genres, how narratives, how are different structures understood somewhat differently, and how do you identify that you're looking at different text structures? What is the author trying to do? Are they trying to tell you something, narrate? And you're also building up your language skills. You know, we have a much broader sense of what I mean by language skills maybe than some. Language is everything, right? It's all the vocabulary, you know. It's the ability to listen to complex syntax and grammar or sentences when you're listening to a lecture or reading. It's all the nuance of that. It's being able to write well. So you want to accumulate knowledge about the language, and you do that over years. So, and you want to build it through text too, because the way texts are written is very different than the way we speak, or most of us speak. So you're really building up a lot of sort of capacity, facility with your language system to handle lots of reading. By the time you get to the high intermediate, you're hoping that you're really focusing in now on reading to learn, reading to do, reading to think, how texts that are about different disciplines like science or history or use different different ways of conveying information, different kinds of understanding, and as you know, in your adult lives, not only in academic terrains, but you know how a training manual might be different than a story in the newspaper, different than a textbook. So it's really getting a little bit more, and then you know you're really kind of getting ready to prepare for a high school equivalency, and certainly if you're at level 5 and you don't have a high school diploma or high school equivalency, you're sort of ready to just prepare for passing the grueling sometimes GED or HiSET tests. So what you're looking at here, and later we're going to go through the 6 subtests that are right on the bottom, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation of each. But when we built this, we built forms of this with a scale for grade K through 12 readers. And so the 6 subtests are made so that about the same score will give you a flat profile. So for example, a reader in the 7th grade who's at the 50th percentile should get pretty much the same level of score on each of the subtests. That's how we set it up. That's how we normed it. That's how we calibrated the scales. So this is the typical pattern of a 50th percentile. It'd be 50 at reading comp, 50 at voc, 50 at more, 50 at send, 50 at efficiency, 50 at word. So we did a sample of adult learners, and this is what we saw. So this was basically English, you know, roughly functional levels 3 to 4, which again is quite a wide span, 3rd through 8th. So what you're seeing here is that on the 2 tests that you most traditionally associate with comprehension tests, reading comprehension by passages and a vocabulary test. Based on their scores, based on this 7th grade metric, they looked like they were at the 70th percentile, as they were doing above average. And then we looked at their scores on the word recognition and the sort of reading fluency test, and all of a sudden they were falling below average. And as you can see in the middle, 2 tests that basically look at sentence level processing, they were sort of between the 2. So this is the dilemma, that is that you have learners who are essentially look like they're scoring higher on comprehension, but their foundational skills are lagging behind. And those lagging foundational skills can cause slower learning progress, delays in learning. So, so I'm going to quickly just have you glance at this because I hope you're all familiar with the evidence-based reading reviews And later at the end, I'm going to mention foundational skills in relationship to these profiles for placement. Right now, I want to go into the Read Ready demo, and I'm going to turn it over to Yevgen just briefly to show you what's going on. And I'm going to blitz our way through some of the subtests to give you a sense of what the items are.
So if you want to administer Read Ready assessment to assess the reading proficiency of your adult learners, all they need is the username and password that you give them. When they log in, they see that they have to take the test, some kind of assignment. So I'm going to click here and have a start button. Then students see some directions. I'm going to flip through a few questions, a few examples, and then I start the test. Now, once the test is done, and by the way, this test can be done remotely. You don't have to supervise the students, and they can be taken, we have a secure browser environment, so they wouldn't be able to even switch between different windows here. But since I'm switching back and forth, I'm switching to the instructor view. So after students have taken the assessment, you get the scores for each skill that is being assessed. And then there are also recommendations for different type of activities you can implement to focus on this specific skill if you find the students are lacking in this skill. And in about 2 weeks, we're adding interpretation as well. So you'll be able to see what that score actually means for students' ability to read. And of course, you have access to the full report of all of your students if you need to see that. So that's a super quick demo. But the takeaway here is it's extremely easy to administer. It works online, and you can do this in remote settings. So the adults don't have to come into the office.
Can you hear me, and can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So what I've jumped to is basically the first subtest, which looks at word recognition and decoding. I have to spend a minute here because I have to reinforce, and a lot of you are dealing with lower learners and lower functional educational levels. We all use all three of these skills every day when we read. We do three things. We see a word we've seen before in print. We know the word, we know its meaning. Within 100 milliseconds, less than a quarter second, we recognize the word, the sound of the word, the internal sound, the phonological code of the sound comes up, and so does the meaning. Split second, all the words we know. Why is that important? Well, it's important because that way when we see words we don't know, we can distinguish them, and it also keeps us moving at speed. The second thing we do is if we've heard a word before, but we haven't seen it in print, or we don't remember seeing it in print, we decode it, we come up with a pronunciation in our head, and then we go, oh my God, that's this word. I didn't remember it was in print. And then we match it, and then it's slowly or quickly becoming a sight word recognition word, right? Because the more we see it in print now, we remember we saw it, we get quicker we see it. And then the third kind is basically a word we've never heard before, never seen before, but we have to remember it, we have to learn its meaning. So we basically say, I don't know what that word is, I've never seen it before, but here's how it would sound. Every day we still use that because they keep creating new words for us. So we have to keep learning how to do this. Okay, so the first test, maybe one of the most important in some ways. Oh, come on, move the screen. Here we go. Is basically checking this. And this is the one that lags in so many of the lower level learners. Okay, water, real word, got it. Sprint, never heard that word before. Can't say it, there's no way to say it that sounds like a word I know. Sprint is a word, sprint is not a word. Class, oh yeah, it's spelled funny, but yes, class sounds like what I'm in. I'm sitting in a classroom, or it used to be. I'm sitting at home now in my room, office. Class, okay, got it. Okay, so that's that word recognition one that everybody's lagging in, okay? Vocabulary is the one they can do pretty well. Synonyms, associates, got it. Okay, they actually score pretty well in that. Why? Because they've been accumulating words for a long time, in their vocabulary. And the way this is set up, they can figure out which word this is, and then they get the meanings. Not great, by the way, but better. Okay, this is our test where we look at morphology. It's just different affixes, prefixes, suffixes. Very important, because once you learn the root of a word, then you've learned something about all the other words once you learn. And so how to use them in sentences. This sentence test is the sentence test, we call it. It's a lot about these connector words, the words that help you to build meaning at a sentence level. So they help you to sort of really puzzle out and build a memory for the whole comprehension part. And then this is the way that we handle the fluency part. What you're seeing is it's building sentences as you go along. So you're sort of reading, the answers are really quick. I gave you this one because it shows you that during the practice, we're giving you feedback, always in practice, to let you know what you're doing and whether you're doing it okay. And then, so that's how that works. And then it just builds up this and you see how fluently you can read passages. And then finally, traditional comprehension test. So again, just as a reminder, what we saw was that these comprehension tests, the last test you saw in the vocabulary test, those are passages and words. They scored above average. When they were doing the efficiency one, the one right before that you have to read it sentence by sentence, and then the words, these other word identification tasks, they were below average, and then the sentences in the middle. So that brings us to this placement in diagnostics. So going back to the beginning, remember I said, okay, maybe it'd be best if we didn't spend a lot of time with learners. Well, yes. And one way to handle that, one way to spend less time and give them unnecessary tests is if you can do an entrance interview. And you, again, my history here is that this has been used for a long time. I hope you're using something like this. If not, there's plenty of ways to do it. But you talk to the learner, you find out their goals, their aspirations. Very importantly, something about their educational history, because the cues are there. How do they think they are as a reader? Did they ever get special services of any kind? Very, very important. Sometimes the simplest thing is the most important. I always try to say this. If they can't see well, it's hard to read. We all know this. And if they're getting older, they're not seeing as well. They may not realize it because they never read well. Vision, hearing is very important, okay? Also, because again, that's where you're bringing in language all the time. Their habits and interests are going to help them for you to get them to motivated. And of course, now with COVID, and even before and even after, digital web technology experience. Oh, and finally, test anxiety, because again, if they're lower learners, these tests, any test can seem intimidating. We tried to make these less intimidating, and we know learners are still frightened sometimes and need support all the way through the process. Now, all of that helps you to plan how you're going to use ReReady with them. So I'm going to go back and remind you very quickly about the way I described the different levels and about where the levels are. A quick interruption to say, and this research will be better and will be more targeted if you please allow us to have your adults try this. You get free access to it. We'll give you feedback. We'll work with you. And we need your feedback to make it better. Okay. If from that interview you think they're at the very low end of the spectrum here, then they are not going to probably take all the tests because it's going to take them too long and too effortful. So if you think they're at the very beginning level, start with the word recognition, maybe go to the vocabulary. But my guess is you already might be 20 minutes in and you're getting, so if they're game and you want and you can, try them more from the two sentence ones that I have here. At the next level up, they should be able to handle, at EFL2, they should be able to handle the first 4 tests or something. Now, I know you don't know for sure yet. You're going to learn this in part by them taking it, by part from that interview, okay? But the first 4 tests shouldn't take more than 20 minutes because they're actually all very straightforward and very quick. So they could be done in 20 minutes. And then if they have stamina, keep going. If they don't, maybe a second session where they try the efficiency test and maybe the comprehension test. And that may take a bit longer. As they get up to the levels 3 and 4, they should be able to take the full battery. They can take it in one full session. I mean, after all, these TABE and other tests are 30, 40 minutes. So they should be able to take the whole thing in one session or break it up into 2 sessions. And what we recommend is if you're scoring at the EFL 4, 6 to 8 or higher level, we always start everybody with the lowest level battery. Remember we said there's multiple forms, there's 3 or 4 easy ones, 3 or 4 medium, 3 or 4 hard. We're going to start them at the easy test. So they might score really high. That's great. You tell them, good, you're doing good, builds confidence, that's wonderful. We'd like to try a more challenging version for you. So have another session where they take the whole intermediate or high battery. That will validate and confirm that they're really solid readers across the profile, or tell you if there is actually targeted weaknesses that you should be attending to. About the targeted weaknesses, next time, since I know I'm running over already, I'd like to talk to you about how you can use these kinds of subtests to really focus on different sets of learning and instruction to bolster up these skills. And what you want to do, and this is where this final slide just about. So look, if you're at the very bottom level, most of your time has to be on alphabetics, but also fluency. But you never fully neglect vocabulary and comprehension. They're in there even the first level. Then the mixture starts to change as you go up. So for example, at the second level, I think a lot more reading fluency to go with this sort of, that's going to strengthen the decoding. And then the decoding is going to in word recognition and learning the sight sound patterns at a more advanced level, multisyllabic words and so forth. But there's vocabulary growth and comprehension more. By the third level, you start to see a balance tipping in favor of comprehension strategy. But don't stop making them read a lot, because that's how they're going to build up the capacity and the language skills. And yes, you're going to focus on different aspects of decoding that are more advanced, the morphological and harder sight pieces. Break words apart all the time. Same thing all the way up to level 5. If you see one of these patterns where they're basically lopsided and they're not topping out near the tops of those word recognition and efficiency tests, they might still benefit. And no, it's no harm. I mean, you can still, spelling is a good way to get at it. So if you practice spelling for things, it's going to help you with your decoding and word recognition, especially at the higher levels. So, couldn't keep it to 30 minutes, I apologize, but basically the message we're seeing in our research is that adult learners sometimes have inflated comprehension and vocabulary compared to other foundational skills. And whenever you see a learner that you don't see them making the progress you thought they were going to make, it's often these foundational skills holding them back, which you can target with good instruction. Ideally begin with a placement interview, because that'll make the anxiety and the structure of the way you use ReadReady over sessions more user-friendly to the learners and to yourself. And be sensitive to these foundational weaknesses. So, I want to thank you for your time and your patience listening to me. And now we're going to open the floor, I think, to questions from everybody.
John, I forgot the special offer.
Ah,
maybe I can take. There you go. All right. So we promised a special offer for attendees of the webinar. So if you sign up for a research study with John and have your students take the ETS Read Ready assessment, you will actually get free access to Capti platform that is actually hosting the assessment. So this assessment has been 15 years in research. It's been administered over 100,000 of times, so it's really robust. And we built it into the Capti platform. That is a
K-12 level, I have to interrupt.
Yes, but it's been taken by many adults as well.
That's true.
And Capti is the AAA for instructors, because we help assess, accommodate, and accelerate reading. So there was a question if there's anything else besides the assessment. So actually, one of the way Capti started was to help accommodate students, accommodate them if they cannot read. So Capti provides lots of active reading tools, reference tools, and lots of accommodations for all types of reading disabilities, including dyslexia, vision loss, autism, and so forth. And Capti has been shown to help improve reading skills. We're a few months away from adding a curriculum that will help build vocabulary, morphology, and reading comprehension skills, and as well as our own intervention that will help develop these same skills. So Capti and ReadReady are actually commercial products that are available for sale, but if you sign up for this study, you will have both available for free. And we'd also like to thank all of the funding agencies, Department of Education, NSF, NIH, and NIDLR for supporting these products.